When I first heard that Steve Nash was hired as the head coach of the Brooklyn Nets, my first thought was, okay. I wasn't surprised in the slightest, yet so many other people in the basketball world were. I personally wasn't following too heavily into the Brooklyn head coach search or anything like that, but I knew that they were looking for one after Kenny Atkinson got fired. Apparently Steve Nash's name was not on that list, so the fact that he got hired made everyone surprised. The closest that we can compare a hiring like this to, in my opinion, is of Steve Kerr with the Warriors in 2014. He was a former point guard with no experience at the head coaching position, but he was hired regardless out of a very competitive field, even replacing tenured head coach Mark Jackson. For some, that deal was also a surprise, and way more of a surprise when they started out the season roughly 20-0. So it's already been proven, especially in 2016 when you had two rookie head coaches going up against each other for the first time in Tyronn Lue and of course Steve Kerr, being a rookie head coach doesn't really matter as long as you've had experience. And oh boy, Steve Nash has had himself some experience. As opposed to Steve Kerr, who drew greatness from the people around him in Greg Popovich all the way to Mike and Tim Duncan and Scottie Pippen, Steve Nash is one of the greatest point guards to ever play the game. A lot like how Steve Kerr played under the greatest coaching minds ever, like Coach Pop and Phil Jackson, Steve Nash has also had his fair share of great coaching. He famously pioneered the 7 seconds or less offense under Mike D'Antoni, and was also under the tutelage of Coach Don Nelson, the originator, basically, of small ball. Like, really, Don Nelson was a very interesting character. Back in the 1990s, when you had Patrick Ewing and David Robinson, all of those folks, he would play lineups with no center. They wouldn't win much, of course, they didn't have defense, but still his Mavericks and Warriors were still very interesting teams. So there's no knock on Steve Nash's repertoire, especially given that Steve Kerr, the one who set the blueprint for point guards becoming successful coaches, was under his staff within these past few years as well. So there's no disrespecting Steve Nash's coaching potential. That's definitely something that's done away with. What's found really interesting about this Steve Nash hire is that he gets control of Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, seemingly out of the blue. But Steve Nash has some deep ties with the power players in Brooklyn. Number one, the GM, Sean Marks, the one that makes all of the power decisions in the team, has been friends with him for 20 plus years.
20 years, that's how long our relationship goes back here, whether that's from playing against him, Canada versus New Zealand, or playing together with him in Phoenix. And just getting to know him and the character that he is, the person he is, the amazing leader that he is, and what he's shown, especially those Phoenix teams that I was on with him, lucky to be a part of with him.
So you've already got the GM as a close friend. Now, if this was anyone less capable than Steve Nash, you might be able to call favoritism, but Steve Nash is the truth. The biggest thing that the Brooklyn Nets were looking for was a communicator, particularly when you have two of the biggest yet edgy players in the league. You need someone who's able to communicate wholly for the team and keep everyone on the same page. Kevin Durant has been known to sulk before, even on the Golden State Warriors after a few years, and Kyrie Irving. In order to handle two mercurial stars like that, you need someone who's able to bridge the gap between them and everyone else. Particularly when you have a team that's been in so much flux. Within the past just season, they've already had so much change in their roster and upheaval, and they haven't even added their best player yet. To make sure everything is good in the locker room, you've got to have someone who's able to mend people together, as opposed to someone just straight up telling them what to do. Think like Phil Jackson and Greg Popovich. Those are two great coaches, but their more impressive feat is managing personalities. Phil Jackson famously had to deal with Kobe and Shaq, and also Michael Jordan as players. Greg Popovich, while he's been blessed with great players, you could imagine that there's been some disputes in those Spurs teams under the covers that we haven't seen, because Pop is so good at managing relationships. The same thing could even be said with Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr came in and was a better communicator than he was a coach, and we saw how that ended up for him. The main way that I look at this hire is in two factors: upside and risk. First off, which person can unlock the most upside in a team with a lot of stars? And two, what is the risk of said person failing with that group? And Steve Nash passes with flying colors on both accounts. Given the information that we know, I would say that he is primarily a star-driven coach. If he tried to coach in Chicago or Indiana or Orlando, it wouldn't work, because that's not what's fit to his style. Similar with Steve Kerr. Imagine if he had went to the New York Knicks and coached there instead of the Warriors, which was a very real possibility. Things would have turned out different for sure, but I can guarantee you the Knicks would still be at the bottom, and Steve Kerr might even be out of a job. But on the flip side, when you have as much talent as Brooklyn does, you need certain people to coach that. Jim Boylen would not be able to coach Kyrie and Kevin Durant, I can guarantee you that. Nor could he even coach the Warriors, because he doesn't have the relationships. Nate McMillan, being the great coach that he is, probably wouldn't be able to handle it either. The Warriors thought the same thing in 2014 when they fired Mark Jackson after having a quite successful year, because they weren't able to get over the hump despite having great talent. Whereas with Steve Kerr, he was so great because he knew his way around stars after being with them for so long, and he knew how to manage them. Steve Nash is going to be great because he's able to manage those personalities as well.
I was able to see it firsthand with my time with him in Phoenix. I think he's the only, or one of the only players I've ever seen show that sort of team first mentality and really live by it. You know, he was not interested in individual statistics.
To add to that point, even his MVP seasons in 05 and 06 were the lowest scoring ever since the Bill Russell era. He notoriously won the MVP over Kobe Bryant because he made his teammates that much better. The reason Steve Nash hasn't been a coach before, even though he's been pursued by so many different teams, was that he simply didn't want to. Once he stepped away from the game in 2015, he sort of took a break from basketball and focused on other interests. He'd often say that he would only become a coach when the time is right. And clearly, with Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving as co-workers, Steve Nash, who's already had a very deep relationship with both of them, with Kevin Durant back when he played with the Warriors where he was his development coach, and also all the way back in 2014 when they established their relationship before. And Kyrie Irving as well, who's reported to know Steve Nash for multiple years, to the point where he even attended Steve Nash's Hall of Fame ceremony. It was a no-brainer for KD and Kyrie. And to top this all off, this decision was made 4 or 5 months ago in May. The Nets already knew what they wanted, and Steve Nash was a perfect fit. There are some rumors about the interim head coach Jack Vaughn and about how he was snubbed from the job even though performing very well in the bubble. Those rumors were proved to be false. He actually held a meeting with the Brooklyn Nets to continue his spot as the lead assistant, as Steve Nash wanted him by his side while he took his first foray into coaching. I mean, obviously you can be a communicator all you want, but at the end of the day, you're going to need a solid coach. And Jack Vaughn has proven that he's more than capable of being a successful head coach after leading Brooklyn to wins over the Lakers, Bucks, and Clippers in Orlando, with roughly 7 players missing from the full roster. He's possibly the best person that Nash could have to back him up. So Steve Nash basically got this job because of the connections that he had with the major players in this whole thing. With Sean Marks, who he's known for over 20 years, with Kevin Durant, who he's known since 2014, and with Kyrie Irving, who's been really good friends with him for so long. When you add to the fact the history of point guards becoming successful head coaches and the resume that he has backing him, then Steve Nash was really a no-brainer. But tell me what you guys think down below, and if you haven't subscribed to this channel, come on, you made it all the way to the end. Don't you want more? Don't you want more? Okay, I'm done. But for real, thanks for watching.